Hey people, welcome to today's vlog. We're going to be doing a voiceover of when to add training volume to your session. I think it's a very nuanced discussion, and we can obviously talk about that in the next 6 minutes. But I think it's an area where people, or most people, they either do too little or they do way too much. I find that people do the kind of the latter. They do too much. But we are seeing a crowd in the industry right now where people are doing actually simply just doing too little, right? The top and back off sets for every single exercise. You got to think that potentially you're doing like 6 working sets for a muscle group per week, which could potentially be too little amounts of volume. So we can obviously have the kind of nuanced discussion regarding like kind of in training intensity, because that's going to dictate the kind of like how much volume you're going to need. Let's just say, for example, because it's going to be way easier, you're going to be training to failure, because then we can just have like base discussions off that. Now, there's going to be some key areas we're going to need to establish, right? Is your execution like on point? If your execution is not on point, you don't deserve more training volume, because you're simply just going to be taxing your joints and not necessarily the musculature. You're also going to be adding a lot of fatigue in that kind of realm as well. So you're kind of adding a lot of junk volume and not necessarily that much local fatigue or tension on said muscle group, right? So we also have to look at like volume increments. For example, if I add a incremental volume to say this chest movement versus something like a fly, understand that this is going to be a lot more taxing than simply just a fly, right? So it's the same as like adding a set to a barbell back squat versus a leg extension. Understand that they seem like one equal amount of volume to quad or hamstrings or whatever, glutes, right? It's mainly going to be quads, but understand that they're going to be completely different. So understand where you're pushing volume. Now, my general advice is kind of having a look at post-set proxies such as pump and such as disruption. Pump is going to be how tight is the muscle, or kind of how tight is the muscle to the skin. So do you get off the machine? Like I get off this machine and my delts are like really popping to the skin. So that's kind of pump, right? I measure it in kind of in different categories with my clients, but you can also do that as well. Now, the second thing is going to be your muscle disruption. So, is the muscle fatigued? For instance, the difference between pump and disruption would be if you're on a lying leg curl or a seated leg curl, your muscles are probably going to be tight to your skin. Now, if you do like an RDL, it kind of just feels a bit vague and a bit fatigued, hence disruption. You just feel really disrupted. If you touch your hamstring, it just feels a bit vague. Same as like if you do like a leg press versus leg extension, you're on a leg extension, you're probably coming off the machine with a hell of a pump, so the muscles tight to the skin. Whereas this leg press, you're probably like walking up the stairs and it just feels a bit vague and a bit like jello. So that's kind of the difference in that. So if we're not getting any of them kind of markers, right? If we're not getting any pump and we're not getting any disruption, we can categorically say that you would need more volume, right? Providing your execution's on point, providing like exercise selections on point as well, because understand that if you're trying to hit your arms and you've picked a hip thrust, it's probably not going to be the best exercise for arms. So actually pick a movement suitable, right? And then kind of establish a good execution and then work out your volume from that. Now we can obviously go the other way, like how much is too much, right? And if we're seeing like major rep drop-offs, so let's just say for example the rep range is like 7 to 10, you're gone from like 10 to 8 to then like 4 to 2, then I'd say that's a bit too much, right? Or you could include downsets. But if pump disruption is there, then it's kind of like, what are you doing past that, right? Not a lot. It's just kind of generating a lot of kind of junk volume, and it's accumulating a lot of fatigue, unnecessary fatigue, because your muscles tax is done. So there's kind of the proxies as well. We can also talk about cross transfer in kind of sessions as well. So let's say for example, we're doing a push session. We've got like a chest press in the next kind of push session or an upper session, and you're hitting chest. If your muscle is extremely sore and it just feels like you can't contract the muscle very well, you would probably need to reduce your total amount of sets in the first push session. So yeah, there's a lot of markers to go off there. A lot of it is going to be like, is your execution on point? And you hear that kind of said all the time, but a lot of people will not be able to can't execute movements properly, but they'll just slam a lot of volume in because they haven't got any pump or disruption. But you haven't got that because you haven't executed the movement properly. or again, it's the exercise selection kind of side of things where, for instance, someone picks like a conventional deadlift and they're not really feeling it anywhere except it's just highly disruptive, and they start like adding sets to that, and it's kind of like, whoa dude, like slow down. But yeah, very generally that's when to add in sets. I would start just very generally, I would start your mesocycle around 8 sets. That's for most people, right? See how you get on. If you're any lower than that, I would be very skeptical, unless you're training with a lot of intensity. But tend to start at 8, and then what we could do is basically end a little bit higher than that. So we'll say the bracket's around like 8 to around 20 is about right. Anything more than 20 sets per muscle group, I'd be very, I'd have to look at your intensity, right, and your execution. But very generally, that's kind of the bracket that we go kind of in between. Anyway, here's a physique update. I hope you enjoyed the start of this vlog. I might do a few more of them if you enjoy it. And yeah, just keep doing the do. Back's growing very well, which is good. And I will see you in the next one.